a human being, But God's spoken many parables, and I've been studying the Gospels and trying to parallel all of them. And when I was younger, at 8 years old, I started, my grandfather, which was my father, my mother got pregnant with me conceived at the age of 18. She gave birth to me. Already had a brother that was born before that. She did faithfully. When I was 2, she committed her heart to the Lord, and she took me to church. And I appreciate the Lord for being her strong man, because for a long time, that's the only man she had. And I thank the Lord for my godly grandfather. It was through Vacation Bible School. My Uncle Danny, he's been a preacher since he was 18 years old. He's reaching 70 years old now. He preached in the Church of God. He brought the word to my grandma and grandpa, and they turned their heart to the Lord. And I thank Jesus for the seed that was planted. It was faithful people at a little church that invited him to church. It wasn't mom and dad raising him there his whole life. But my mother never experienced a father that wasn't saved or a mother that wasn't saved. So she knew right. She just didn't understand about the strong man. Jesus talks about a strong man in the New Testament as being a devil. He refers to the devil. He refers to how he's a strong man in a house. Well, that's what we are before we have Jesus in us. We're a sinful creature that doesn't understand the difference between right and wrong. At 8 years old, after my grandfather died, I started marijuana along with other drugs followed, hard drugs. At 10 years old, I had my first felony conviction of vandalism. At 13 years old, I faced 8 counts of possession of a firearm, and I stole them. Fortunately, God didn't imprison me at that point. And I went on about my life. At 18 years old, I had a few companies that I owned that I laundered money through. I was selling drugs then at that time. I moved up to Independence after I come back from Mexico. There was some people that I owed money to that were going to kill me, and I moved to Independence, Missouri, and I started experimenting with making LSD, and I sampled it on myself. And I had 2 other friends that had died on it, and I ended up tapping my chest. And all I could say is praise Jesus and do this. Well, fortunately, my parents found me. They picked me up at a bus stop with 3 boxes. They took me back to Joplin, Missouri, and for 2 weeks they prayed for healing on my body, for deliverance of a strong man I allowed to come in me and overtake me. And the last night, my mother told me that if the evidence of healing wasn't there in the morning, she was going to have to admit me. Well, that morning I woke up, and what I was thinking in my mind, I was able to tell her, Mom, can I have some scrambled eggs and some bacon? And she smiled and started praising God and made me breakfast. And then my father came in after I was done eating. He had his World War II. The man I call my father, he was my stepfather that came in my life when I was 13 years old. And God used him to bargain with the judge to keep me from going to juvenile prison in Kansas. And my mom married that man, and he was an awesome father to me. He brought his World War II Foot Locker to me, set it down, and opened it up. And in there was brand new underwear, brand new socks, and a week's worth of brand new clothes, and a Bible. And then he closed it, and he threw a bus ticket on there, and he said, Shannon, you got one or two choices. You can go to a place called Teen Challenge, and you can learn who the Lord is and get your life right, or you can go back to where you were doing everything, and you can die there in that sin, but keep it from me and your mom. We're tired of you hurting us living like that. So I took that bus ticket. I went to Teen Challenge, and I spent 28 months there, and had a lot of the Word poured into me by a lot of good Christian people, a lot of old professors from the Assembly of God College, Central Bible College. Had a lot of them sit down and spend a lot of good time with me, instructing me and trying to pour things in me. At the time, it's called Teen Challenge, but at the time, I was the youngest next to a 32-year-old man in a place called The Farm in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, of 115 men. They, from 30 to 64, these teenagers were in there. I had a conception in my mind. I conceived that there's a bunch of teenagers, there's a bunch of older people that lived their whole life in sin, with the strong man being a devil in their life, them following the world and, doing it their way and not knowing how to deal with root problems. Well, in there, I still didn't find all my root problems, what they were. When I got out of there, I worked for 2 years as a machinist, but I got back involved with the same people when I moved back from New York at the time, and I spent another year and a half of my life doing the same thing again. I relapsed, as they say, because I really didn't understand what my root problems were. I did ask Jesus in my heart, and, I'll look at the front of this Bible. It was back around January 7th, 1993, so it was in 92 I asked Jesus to be the Lord of my life. I was allowed to go to trade centers and radio centers and all over the place to share my testimony of what God did for me. I traveled with the New Creations Choir for 8 months and sang in a lot of places, and felt kind of like a big shot because I was 18 years old, but I was kind of missing the point. There's several ministries that I started, and then I said, Lord, will you bless this? Will you move on this? And I really didn't understand that although I was saved, I was trying to be a strong man. I was trying to man up my vessel and tell my vessel what to do, and then asking God to bless it. I had it backwards, You got to let God have full control. You don't go start something and ask God to bless it. You don't do it in your own way and then ask God's blessings. You ask God first. You seek God first. My scripture, I don't want to get off of it, but the first thing, as far as who the strong man is in your house on this lesson, that I want to try to convey to you guys, it's got to be God. God's got to be your driving force, got to be your everything, your all in all, because when your family dies, you count on so much, or your spouse or your doctors can't figure it out, or your church can't figure it out, or there's a real living God that parts the same seas as he did for all the Jews back then. And the land was dry. Their shoes weren't all muddy when they got on the other side. He doesn't just do it a little bit. He fixes us all the way. I think I'm going to go ahead and sing that song. I want to sing this first, because although we identify our problem and we might have a wrong, like in here I've wrote down in my notes, your strong man might not be the difference between whether you're saved or not saved, because salvation ain't just your soul going to heaven. Salvation is being healed from worry and doubt and depression and laziness and rejection and fear and trust. we can experience God's saving power in them aspects of our life as well, because we are a body, soul, and spirit being, you know. We got God's driving force, like Paul says, trying to drive us to do the right thing. But it doesn't mean we'll always do the right thing. So we need grace. And I don't want anyone by any means think they're demon-possessed because they suffer worry, doubt, or depression. Those are human natures. But that's where the enemy tries to creep in to try to get you to give up, to not go on, to not pray, to not believe, to not hope, to not have faith. So I want you to realize you're not necessarily demon-possessed, or you got a devil ruling you. But what I want you to know is acknowledge those are avenues that he tries to destroy a church, a country, a family. And keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open all the time that you're following the Lord. Not live in fear, because God overcomes fear. You fear God that's able to condemn the body and soul in hell, not the devil. I mean, when he comes against you, you got to fight. You got to have a shield of faith, knowing that his grace is sufficient, that his blood is sufficient, that his body wasn't sacrificed in vain. And it's when you believe and hope and know in that you walk in victory, that you can disciple a church, that you can grow a church. You know, those are foundational things. Prayer is a key thing. Prayer is an attitude or a way of life. It's a mindset. That's how you continually pray without ceasing, is you've got a made-up mind. This is it fully. In 2004, after that, my grandmother passed away. My father passed away. The devil trying to get in there, hey, you know, go drinking, you know, you're out on the road, you're with this company, nobody's ever going to know. Well, I fell into that for a little bit. Then I had a friend that said, okay, I'm bidding jobs up in Raymore. This is in 2002. You need to get away from that place, Shanon. And he stepped up. This man's name is Richard Spivey. He stepped up and he tried fathering me, mentoring me. And God knew that's what I needed. And I went to work for that company. It was called Abba Electric, our Heavenly Father's electric company. And I'm glad that the Lord put him in my life at that time, because it has put me where I need to be. In 2004, I was hit by a drunk driver. I was laid up for over a year. It broke my spine, broke my right femur, punctured my lung, bruised my heart. Still take a little medication for my heart. I got a little murmur there and some high blood pressure. I had a daughter born that year. Then later on, you know, I move up here in 2010, and I was going through a divorce that started in 2008. And I came up here to get closer to my daughter, and I started going to church up here, and got into a place called Life Issues, where I was helping people that was fighting drug abuse. And it was good for me, too. I got to share my testimony. And then I started going to another church. This parolee, he's on 5 years parole. He begged me to go to this church. And I ended up going to that church, and my daughter wanted to get baptized at that church. And I met Teresa, beautiful lady. I thank the Lord for her. She's very supportive to me, and I just thank the Lord. The Lord knows my heart. I can't even express or begin to convey to the church how God works through her to support me. So, although we're committed, he still tries to destroy us. But he has overcome the world. You know, God is our strength and our shield. I'm going to go to Mark chapter 3 and 23. I'm going to start out there. They asked Jesus, so he called them to himself and said to them in the parable, How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand.